The FBI investigation into the massive digital heist of global bank cloud servers. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine waking up tomorrow morning to discover that billions of dollars, money stored in some of the most secure financial systems on Earth, has simply vanished. No alarms. No broken vault doors. No masked thieves running from a bank. Just a single line of code, executed somewhere in the vast digital infrastructure that powers the global financial system. And within seconds, the unthinkable happens. Accounts are drained. Cloud servers are compromised. And the very institutions that promised absolute security are suddenly scrambling to understand how the impossible just became reality. Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling and controversial investigations unfolding in the world of cybersecurity and finance. An investigation that has drawn the attention of federal agents, digital forensics teams, and the most powerful banking institutions on the planet. An investigation led by the FBI into what could become known as the largest digital heist in financial history. But this story isn't just about hackers. It's about something far more unsettling. It's about how the very systems designed to protect your money may have created the perfect vulnerability for criminals to exploit. Because for years, the cybersecurity industry has been telling us a comforting story. A story about innovation, about advanced encryption, about biometric authentication, about artificial intelligence guarding the vaults of our digital wealth. We were told that modern banking security had reached a new era, an era where cybercriminals simply couldn't break through. Industry gurus proudly declared that biometric firewalls, decentralized cloud architecture, and multi-layered authentication systems had created an impenetrable fortress around the world's financial infrastructure. Your fingerprints, your facial scan, your encrypted identity, all supposedly forming a digital shield so powerful that no hacker on Earth could breach it. That's what the experts said. But according to emerging forensic evidence, that promise may have been dangerously misleading. Because in the case now under investigation, those very systems didn't just fail. They may have been the gateway that allowed the breach to happen in the first place. Tonight, we're breaking down the shocking details of how investigators believe this unprecedented digital theft unfolded. How attackers may have quietly infiltrated cloud-based banking infrastructure. How they exploited something cybersecurity insiders call invisible fingerprints. And how a flaw buried deep within complex security protocols might have opened the door to billions of dollars disappearing from global financial networks. But before we go further, we need to understand the myth that made this heist possible. For decades, banks relied on something simple: centralized systems. Massive, heavily fortified data centers where financial transactions were processed and stored. These systems weren't perfect, but they were predictable. Security teams knew where the data lived. They knew where to build defenses. They knew where attacks might come from. Then came the cloud revolution. Financial institutions began migrating their infrastructure to distributed cloud environments, systems spread across countless servers, data centers, and digital nodes around the world. The promise was revolutionary. Instead of one vault, there would be thousands. Instead of one target, there would be an ever-shifting network. Bank executives and tech consultants promoted this shift as the future of financial security. Decentralization, they said, made systems stronger, more resilient, more difficult to attack. But what if that assumption was wrong? What if complexity didn't make these systems safer, but instead made them harder to defend? According to digital forensics teams examining the breach, the attackers may have taken advantage of exactly that. A security architecture so layered, so complicated that it created blind spots no one fully understood. Imagine a fortress with 10,000 doors, each one protected by a lock, each lock monitored by a different guard, each guard relying on software written by different engineers across multiple continents. Now imagine what happens if one tiny flaw appears in just one of those locks. Not a broken lock, not an obvious weakness, just a subtle piece of code that behaves in a way no one expected. That's all it takes. And in this case, investigators believe the attackers found exactly that. A microscopic flaw buried inside a massive digital ecosystem. The type of vulnerability that doesn't set off alarms. The kind that doesn't trigger immediate alerts. Instead, it quietly grants access. And once access is granted, the entire system begins to unravel. According to sources close to the investigation, the breach may have involved something cybersecurity analysts refer to as identity layer manipulation. In simple terms, the attackers didn't break through the bank's defenses. They became the defenses. They manipulated authentication protocols so that their activity appeared legitimate. Authorized. Trusted. To the system, they weren't intruders. They were verified users. Verified processes. Verified transactions. This is where the concept of invisible fingerprints enters the story. Modern financial systems rely heavily on behavioral authentication. Not just passwords or fingerprints, but patterns. How you type. How you move your mouse. The devices you normally use. The networks you connect from. All of this creates a digital signature that systems use to verify your identity. But if an attacker can replicate that signature, they can effectively become you. Or worse, they can become the system itself. And that's exactly what investigators suspect may have happened. Instead of launching an obvious attack, the perpetrators may have slowly embedded themselves within the infrastructure, learning how the system behaved. Studying its patterns. Mapping its authentication pathways. Until eventually, they could imitate them perfectly. At that point, the fortress doesn't need to be broken into. Because the gates open automatically. The most alarming detail. Some forensic experts believe the actual execution of the theft, the moment the funds began moving, may have taken only seconds. Years of technological advancement. Billions spent on cybersecurity. Thousands of engineers designing protective systems. And in the end, a single line of code may have been enough to trigger the breach. But the story doesn't end there. Because once the breach was detected, federal investigators began a massive forensic reconstruction. And what they found has raised serious questions about the future of financial security. According to early reports, the attackers didn't simply steal money. They manipulated the way transactions were processed across multiple cloud environments simultaneously. This created a cascading effect. Transactions appeared legitimate in one system. But when those transactions were verified across other systems, the data had already been altered. In other words, the security systems themselves were unknowingly validating the fraudulent activity. The more layers of verification there were, the easier it became for the attackers to hide. It's a paradox that many cybersecurity experts are only now beginning to confront. The same complexity that was supposed to make systems stronger may actually make them harder to secure. And if that's true, the implications are staggering. Because the modern global economy relies almost entirely on cloud-based financial infrastructure. Banks, investment firms, payment networks, government financial systems, all interconnected, all dependent on digital authentication and cloud processing. If those systems can be manipulated from the inside, it raises a terrifying possibility. What if this breach wasn't just a one-time event? What if it exposed a structural weakness built into the foundation of modern digital finance? That's exactly what investigators are now trying to determine. The FBI's cyber division has reportedly assembled one of the largest digital forensics teams in recent memory. Experts in cloud architecture, cryptographic analysis, behavioral authentication, artificial intelligence, all working together to reconstruct what happened inside the servers during the breach. Every line of code is being analyzed. Every authentication request is being examined. Every data packet is being traced. Because somewhere inside that massive digital trail lies the answer to a question that could redefine the future of financial security. How did this happen? Was it an advanced criminal organization? A state-sponsored cyber operation? An insider attack? Or something even more unsettling? A flaw so deeply embedded in modern cloud infrastructure that no one realized it was there. Until now. And as the investigation unfolds, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The narrative we've been told about digital security may not be as solid as we believed. For years, the tech industry promoted the idea that more technology equals more protection. More layers, more algorithms, more complexity. But sometimes, complexity creates opportunity. Opportunity for mistakes. Opportunity for hidden vulnerabilities. Opportunity for someone patient enough to study the system and exploit it. So the question we need to ask ourselves is simple. Are our financial systems truly secure? Or have we built a digital house of cards, one that only appears stable until the right piece is removed? In this video, we're going to unpack everything we know so far about the FBI's investigation. The forensic clues, the security failures, the hidden vulnerabilities inside global cloud banking systems, and the unsettling possibility that this massive digital heist may be only the beginning. Because if a single line of code really can drain billions from the world's most secure financial networks, then the real story isn't just about one breach. It's about whether the entire system needs to be reimagined. And by the end of this investigation, we may discover that the greatest threat to our digital wealth isn't hackers breaking into the system. It's the system itself. Stay with us.